All right, my name is Johnathan Hallahan. I'm a men's peer recovery specialist at Roads to Recovery. First off, I want to say good afternoon and thank you all for showing up and being part of this. This is Advocacy.
Right.
And that's what the topic is going to be about. Thank you. And I'm going to go ahead and just do a little introduction on me. And once again, thank you for the previous speakers. It's very inspirational, it gives me hope. And that's something I really needed when I needed recovery the most when I started my journey in 2018. Did I go back? Sure did. Okay. So in the agenda, I will kind of go into a brief story, go into story time. And we're going to talk about the PRS, varied scope of work, and then advocating for yourself at work. So my story begins, I struggled with a lot of anxiety. I'm very anxious now, just so y'all know. And with struggling with social anxiety in school, divorce runs in my family, moving to a new school at the age of 15 when I moved in with my dad, I kind of threw away like a lot of my, I used to play sports a lot and used to hang out with a bunch of friends I had at Craig County High School because that's where I grew up in my adolescence at Newcastle. Moved to Salem and attended Salem High School, and that's when I started first experiencing with cannabis and drinking to cope with social anxiety. Ongoing from there, at the age of 18, it progressed to where I was neglecting my schoolwork, not wanting to come home because home was a very depressing place to be with the divorce that was going on between my dad and my stepmother. And the friends that I got involved with were smoking cannabis, drinking beer, and there was a different, variety of things that were going on, but there was a part of me that, I was raised well, tough love, doing chores, all that stuff, knew right from wrong, but really had a hard time applying my coping skills when it came to anxiety and depression. And so the only thing I felt that was helping was the drugs and kind of feeling like a sense of belonging with the crowd of people I was in. So I neglected my schoolwork. I didn't really stop, get involved in sports. And it turned into like weekends to pretty much every day. And then I met at the time, my girlfriend, and I moved in with her in Roanoke, Garden City specifically. She was dealing with addiction herself with pills, and that's when I started having experienced pills and whatnot. And we partied a lot, still had a lot of social anxiety. Didn't think I had a problem. I mean, I definitely knew there was like, I get angry a lot, I get sad a lot. I really couldn't put my finger on why. Like I would start thinking the way I was thinking. I was just very irritable all the time, very frustrated, and very sad, even when things seemed to be going right. And then at the age of 21, I had to go in and out of the hospital for a month and a half. Prior, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease at 12 years old, and then I was bleeding out from the varices, so I had to go into the hospital. And for a month and a half, they would pump me back with blood into my body so I could function. And it seemed like every time they were curing me, I'd go home and it would repeat. Come to find out, I was drinking so much and using so much that my liver was shutting down at the age of 21. I have an autoimmune deficiency in the liver called primary sclerosing cholangitis. And when they finally did fix me, and it took to the point where I lost so much blood that if it wasn't for the nursing staff and my mom driving 40 miles to get to me to sign a consent, because I couldn't breathe on my own, everything was shutting down. They had to put me in emergency. I had to go to emergency surgery, and thank God for the nursing staff. They saved my life that day, and I thank God for that too. So coming out of the hospital, going back to my girlfriend's house, still dealing with depression, social anxiety, and liver disease at 21, and being told I cannot participate in drinking activity, weed or smoking weed, doing this and that, which I thought was normal. And I was like, everybody else is doing, why can't I? It makes me feel good. The drugs worked. However, it did not work when it came to quality of life. And so from there, I collected disability from the government, felt like I could be in a room full of people, things were going well, and I felt so alone. So that's when the disease of addiction took more of a threshold where I experiment with harder drugs such as cocaine and all that and other stimulants. And if I couldn't get those stimulants, I'd do anything. You just put it right in front of me, all right, let's go. Something else I struggled with was when I was younger, I heard that God had a plan for me. And when you're going through addiction in this depression state, I spat at God. I was really upset with him. So I did everything in my power, saying, I just thought in my mind the world's better off without me. I'm going to prove you wrong, God. You don't need me. I'm done. I was too scared to do the whole like gun thing, hang myself, whatever. But I could take a lot of drugs. I was good at that. But I kept waking up every day just chasing the same feelings, trying to cope with life. Lost a girlfriend. Parents, they didn't trust me no more. My grandmother even said to me, she's like, I don't even trust you around my father or around your dad because we're afraid you might hurt him. I heard that a lot. And then I became homeless, couch surfed for a little bit, from dope house to dope house. And there was a part of me inside, there was this empathy in me that I would take on a lot of other people's baggage, other people's stories that I've heard that they were in the midst of their addiction. But I could not ever really face me. I hated me, could not love me. And so I began to see that I had a little bit of a problem. You know, I wasn't fully committed. So I went to Mount Regis in Salem for 30 days. I didn't fully participate, but I heard a few good things that stuck with me. But every time I was faced with life challenges, bills and trying to get a home, trying to hold a job, get that trust back from my family, I continued to use and use and use. To the point in 2018, it was so bad that I've probably been to thousands of different programs, detox, it's countless. And I remember the scene very well. I was sitting in this little chair and I had alcohol in my hand and substances in the other hand, and there's something in my spirit that said, you're going to die like this. And I don't want to die. There's got to be something else. And I put it down and I called Blue Ridge Behavioral Health in Roanoke called 911 to get some help, and they took me back to that detox center. And I said, I will not leave until I get some help. I need to get out of Roanoke. I need to do something different. I'm willing to do anything at all costs to stay sober. So Roads came up, and I was taken to Roads Recovery. I met my peer recovery specialist, which was the first time I've ever heard of a peer recovery specialist or peer coaches. And his name was Jim Webb, and I remember getting in the car with him, and David even said it perfectly. It was just like a safe place to be. I've given peers rides. I've transported peers myself as a peer recovery specialist, and a lot of powerful conversations happened during that time. And so he educated me on what I needed to do. He gave me some resources. I started getting more involved with the 12-step programs. The peers that were in my house, David actually he just showed up a week before I did. So we were roommates. And, when I was down, he was very uplifting, and vice versa, I'm sure. There was a lot of hope. There was a lot of love, a lot of support. I did have a couple setbacks. It's because something that was taught to me that didn't fully ingrain was recovery has to come first no matter what. I didn't know how to self-advocate for myself. I really couldn't find my own voice. I still struggle with depression. I still struggle with social anxiety. I just have a better way of coping with it these days. So I just celebrated 2 years this past Christmas. I give glory to God on that one. And I did put in some hard work, and I thank Roads to Recovery for that too. So now I am no longer a peer of Roads to Recovery. I'm a full-time employee, peer recovery specialist. I help with the ARMS stuff, which is we track data and progress with our peers. I'm an extra body at the homeless shelter as well. If they need peer recovery resources, I'm there for that. And sky's the limit. I'm thinking about going to college and see if I can go into counseling and just take it further. So that's a little bit about me. I probably said too much. Okay. So I hope everyone has seen this on the ORS website. I'm not going to read too much into this because there's a lot going on here, but this is like the scope of practice that we all do as peer recovery specialists. So we provide face-to-face interaction that supports an individual achieving their self-identified level of recovery, wellness, independence, or personal strengths. We serve as role models for recovery and wellness and self-advocacy, provide feedback and insight into the value of every individual's unique recovery experience. So that speaks highly because, you know, I've seen peers such as David and such my other peer coaches, they've been excellent role models, and I've been told in like 12-step programs and other settings that follow the winners, right? So those role models empowered me to do better with my own individual life. So I'm thankful for the advocates in my life today. We clarify and enhance self-advocacy skills, encourage peers to develop independent behavior that is based on informed choice. Keyword choice. I believe in multiple pathways. I remember kind of feeling like I didn't have a choice. I was a slave to my addiction. But even in early recovery, there was a few that I felt like I had to do this specific like things to stay recovered because I didn't know how to make my own choices. I've been a slave to my addiction for a long time. And once again, those peer recovery specialists, the coaches that coached me, helped me empower to make my own choices that followed line with my recovery. So we assist peers in developing empowerment skills through self-advocacy, establish and maintain a peer relationship based on mutuality rather than a hierarchical, I cannot pronounce that word, relationship. Partner with another person to facilitate recovery dialogues and other evidence-based or best practice methods. A couple other ones, we mentor community integration activities or one-on-one or in groups, provide community network and linkage with social, recreational, spiritual, volunteer, educational, or vocational resources. Assist a person in identifying traditional and non-traditional community-based supports that sustain a healthy lifestyle, provide opportunities to practice socialization, interaction, and engagement abilities in the community, support and encourage and enhance the development of natural support systems and independent choice and participation. So the key is, you know, for me, early 6 months of my recovery, I felt like I kind of had to work on my individual self, but then later on, as I reached a certain level of in my recovery, my peer coaches got me involved with the community more, like, you know, going to groups, sharing my story. Like sharing your story is a huge piece to advocacy. When I went to those 12-step programs and heard other people's stories, you know, it empowered me very much so to say, you know what, maybe someone can get something from me when I share my story. So I get involved in like coalitions like CVAR, we have a peer collectors group, or just go into multiple things, Smart Recovery, MAR groups, and I share my story. Because one thing I hear, I take the meat and spit out the bones kind of thing. I might not relate fully with your story, but I can probably resonate with some of the behaviors and emotions that are going on. And that connection piece is huge. So let's see. We support for day-to-day problem solving relating to integration and reintegration into the positive community of choice. Enhance the person's family's ability to navigate the systems of service delivery related to the person's written wellness recovery plan or individual service plan. Provide, when available, time-limited transportation and focusing on increasing the individual's transportation independence through access to natural and formal resources. So that looks like, you know, I did not have a license when I first came out. I had nothing. And when I started seeing others get their license back and do what they needed to do, you know, one of the things I do with other peers is encourage them, like, hey, you need to get a job. It's good for you. We need an income. You know, when it comes to paying bills and you need transportation, which is one of the huge barriers in our community when it comes to getting into recovery. And so I went and got my license, and it's just an empowering thing because you feel free again. You feel like you can do things on your own. So that's one of the things I do with my peers. Assist on other behavioral health care services providers in identifying program and service environments that are conducive to recovery. Provide emotional support during the acquisition and exploration and sustaining of employment and or educational services. Attend treatment team and program development meetings, so that promotes to use to self-direct recovery and wellness tools in individualized treatment plan. Facilitate an inclusion of the person being served in all meetings that relate to the delivery of services. And the CPRS will share his or her unique perspective on recovery from mental illness or substance use disorder with non-peer staff. Assist non-peer staff in identifying programs and environments that are adventurous to support recovery and wellness outcomes. I like this quote, be the change you want to see in the world. When I see change around me that's for the good, that empowers me to do better. And that's something I try to do with my other peers is, be that role model, going out and doing things and just providing, whatever hope I need to provide. And just being that role model, just being that change that I want to see in the world and that will benefit recovery. So we will benefit our cause and be more effective advocates when we check up on our own attitudes and behaviors related to stigma and language. And stigma is a huge one, which we'll get into that shortly. So what is advocacy? Advocacy is defined as any action that speaks in favor of, recommends, argues for a cause, supports or defends or pleads on behalf of others. So it leads into why must we advocate?
Can you go back a couple of slides? I think some people were trying to take a photo.
Sure. Just a couple slides?
No.
Okay, I can stay right there.
Very popular slide.
Mm-hmm. So the question is, why must we advocate? Well, number one is stigma. And the stigma is an attitude or quality that significantly discredits an individual in the eyes of others. It causes people to look at someone and have a negative attitude toward that person because of certain quality or characteristics. For example, a person with substance use disorder allows and calls people with addiction to be treated differently from other people. This is the definition of discrimination, unequal, unjustifiable treatment, including oppression, rejection, punishment, harassment, blame, and exclusion. We try not to punish the people for their addiction. Addiction is a disease. However, the symptoms of it is what we encourage to try to change. So people may believe that a person with a substance use disorder has brought it on him or herself, and they may believe that addiction is caused by a moral weakness and sinful behavior. So one of the things that how stigma affected me, is I remember in high school, and I think I was like 17, and I was very well known for like skipping classes, going in the hallways, getting high, whatever, going outside of school. I've been caught many, many times. And there was a few people who understood, trying to encourage me to do better, but there was also people who told me, you're not going to do anything with your life. You're just going to die, you're going to end up in jail, you're a failure, you're nobody. I've heard that stuff, and that, when you're dealing with depression and the disease of addiction and being social anxiety and all that stuff, I'm already beating myself up enough. So I don't need to hear you tell me that I'm going to fail, because I'm already thinking all that. But it's not the person's fault necessarily. Sometimes people just don't know. They don't understand because they've never lived that experience. So that's the beauty of my story and my recoveries. I can connect on that level where some may not. And it's our jobs to advocate for those people and share and talk about stigma. How can we change the language? What can we do and make it about them, person-centered. So stigma can lead to people begin to separate us from them. And we say we are not like them. They don't deserve our respect. We should not mix with them. We are justified in treating them differently. Sounds terrible, doesn't it? So we got to find the balance between I and we. And this is all from the PRS manual, right? Who's read the PRS manual? Okay, so what I'm about to get into is from the PRS manual.
Can you go back one slide again?
Yes. Yep, sorry, I am going a little too fast. I apologize.
Popular slides.
And this is interesting because when I took the test a couple years ago, I'll be honest, I kind of skimmed through it, took the meat, spit out the bones kind of thing. And every once in a while, I do go back to it and kind of re-educate myself. And when I saw this, I dug a little deeper, and this just resonated with me so much. How stigma leads to discrimination, which leads to the roots of all this, where we begin to separate, categorize ourselves. The addicts to normal people, society to, that individual doesn't feel like they belong, which is something I've struggled with all my life. Oh, till this moment. Am I able to move on? Okay, so finding the balance between I and we. So becoming we, for some of the people we serve, their experiences leave them with the feeling that they are dependent on the system of care for all aspects of their lives. That person may start to feel that their own thoughts and feelings take a back seat to those of the treatment team. That can lead to a person feeling like the only place they can be safe is in a hospital or crisis stabilization unit when life gets challenging. That is huge because I felt like that for years. I felt like, and nothing against the hospitals, they are a safe place. And there's nothing against the therapists and all that, there's good suggestions. But when addiction is so severe and you're so solely focused on trying to combat that, and for me, combating other things, I'll tell you, hey, just like the drugs, you give it to me, I'll do them. Well, I'll take suggestions, but I might be following too much what you're doing and not feel free that I have my own choice, my own voice. So that's how becoming like, all right, I just need to be in the hospital. I just need to be in a program. I need to be in detox. Those are safe places, but the goal is long-term recovery. So we need to find the balance between we and I. As said here, yes, hospitals are a safe place, but the goal is to empower a person to make independent choices, build self-advocacy, and promote wellness. Next slide. Gaining the I. Recovery happens when the people we work with realize they can determine their own path in their own recovery journey. We need to empower them to realize they have eternal self-sufficiency to make their decisions that lead them to their best life. It is all about balance. I started gaining that I after a few months of, taking some good suggestions. And with my peer coaches, they said, well, they don't say, hey, you need to do this, you need to do that. They asked me, they said, well, what would you like to do? What were your dreams? What were your, when you were a kid, we all had dreams of what we wanted to become. And at the time, all I knew was how to cook and be a sous chef and all that stuff. But I didn't feel like, I still felt alone. I felt like this can't be the only thing I'm good at. Like, there's got to be more. So if it wasn't for the encouragement from the peer coaches and my support network, I wouldn't be where I'm at today, sharing this with you. So gaining that I is huge. So becoming an I. Developing self-centered fears and expectations of the world. Addictions are so much of the individual's focus that they begin to lose a sense of belonging to the larger world. We want people to get involved in the community. We want them to feel like they belong. We want them to advocate and share their story with others so we can keep growing in numbers. I saw it earlier where we had only 100 PRSs at a certain time, and now we're reaching up to 900. That's beautiful. That's because we're sharing our stories. We're coming together and talking about that stuff. But for some in early recovery, addictions is like, we're still combating that, and it's that's what we're supposed to do, connect with them, empower them, so they can feel a part of the larger world. So with all this being said, this can all lead to a person losing their ability to be part of their community, and we want to do the opposite. Can anybody relate to any of this?
Everything.
I would like to hear some, if y'all don't mind sharing.
I didn't suffer from like addiction, but I was abused growing up, and I developed PTSD. I guess I was just couldn't cope, and I don't know how long, when someone finally found out that I was self-injuring and I ended up in the hospital, but growing up in the community I grew up in, I was told what to think, what to say, not to question anything. I was never good enough. You know, if you made one mistake, you were damned to, you know, whatever. And so I just never believed in myself. And so when that happened, I didn't know what to do. I had gone from my family's home. I got married a month before I turned 19. And when I got sick, I had no one else. So I've had the support of the Surrey Community Treatment and my very first peer counselor. I tell people she made the very first dent in my armor. She left years ago, and we've remained friends still. She's helped me through this process of becoming a peer recovery specialist. She's helped me develop my skills and all like that. So I know the importance, and like when you say, when you find your voice, that is the biggest thing that made a difference in me. And I've told my fellow peers I work with, I said, and my psychiatrist was worried to death for me because my family disowned me and my church discommunicated me, all but my son. And she was worried about me constantly. I said, no, I said, I've never been happier. Because I don't, I know that I've got a right to feel like I feel. I said, I take responsibility for the pain I cause people that love me, but I wasn't necessarily the cause of what caused my pain in the first place, and my actions were caused because I was in so much pain, I was trying to get rid of the pain. Well, I didn't suffer like I told them an addiction, but I suffered the self-injury, and it was basically for the same reason. And they asked me why I do this, because it's like something, I could see something coming out of me. And so it just, that's why I tell people, I mean, it's taken me a while. I told them I had my light bulb moment in 2020. My therapist told me one time, she said, you know, the pandemic was a terrible thing for a lot of people, but it was the best thing that ever happened to you. So, yeah, that's why I tell people, you find your voice, and that makes a big difference. And another thing is when I started learning about my diagnosis, about why my brain acted the way it did, I was better able to respond. And so when I got better, I wanted to give back and help people like me.
That is advocacy, people. That's very, very powerful. And
when I say,
I hear you.
I know the importance because me and my brother, we came from the same household. He was 3 years older than me, and he was my protector. He didn't have the support I had. My family treated him like that too. And he was a Navy veteran. He retired, but he gave up. He tried to go to rehab 3 times, and he just gave up, and he died because of it. So I know the importance.
Keep doing your thing. Keep sharing that voice. Anybody else?
I was thinking about when you were talking about the we to I concept, like, you know, it took me 30 years to realize the best way to get over being self-centered is help someone else. Yeah. You know, because I'm just that smart, right? Like, it takes a while, right? And it's more the fact that, you know, we is important. I don't know if anybody's seen it. I'm just going to throw it out there. There's a really cool TED Talk called "Everything I Thought I Knew About Addiction Was Wrong," and he proposes the idea that maybe addiction isn't even really about chemicals. It's about bonding. Just an idea. Just throw it out there.
I used to say that I didn't really have a drug problem. That was a symptom. I had a knee problem.
Yep. I don't know how to be here in the world.
Thank you for sharing. So gaining the we. Honest consideration of others while still being able to focus on one's own wellness becomes a benchmark for recovery. And again, this is all about balance. So getting them involved in the community, whether it's like me transporting them to a meeting, being in the meeting with them, whatever it takes. And we're resource brokers, so based on the individual, when I build that rapport with them, it's like, what do you want? What do you need? What is your dreams? What are your goals? All right, let's revisit that in the next month or so. And I've seen a lot of things like people getting their license back, getting jobs that they actually can hold. By the way, I came into recovery and it was tax season because we're getting ready to come up on tax season. I had 15 W-2s. And I didn't get a dime back. Look at me now. So it's an awesome thing where when we meet people where they're at, they share their dreams and goals, and they actually they get to that. And I'm sitting here, I've been blessed more and more. I didn't see this coming, and there's more to come.
And
So
I really like
if I can do that, I can do
you
that.
said about
somebody else.
believing in yourself was the hardest part. That's for real.
All right. So advocating for yourself at work. Look for opportunities to apply your skills and experience, which I do that every day. Be a champion for recovery at your organization and agency. That's, once again, sharing your stories, meeting people where they're at, and hold them accountable in a healthy way. I needed so much accountability, and it saved my life. And there's a lot of heroes in my story that I've met throughout my recovery journey. So thank you all for that. You know who you are. Ask for training opportunities and accept them when they come along. And so some people would be proud of that. CIT, I got involved in that. MRT, and I used to work at Horizon Behavioral Health, the CSB here in Lynchburg, and I was involved in drug courts, which y'all hear a little bit about that tomorrow. And every training opportunity, every public speaking to go share my story, I took advantage of it. Even though it was very uncomfortable, I didn't like it, I was like, I don't know, I didn't even want to be up on stage here. I was just super nervous. But in order to get to your comfort zone, you got to go through the uncomfortable stuff. I was so comfortable with chaos, I didn't know how else to do things. So when I saw training opportunities, and the workplace I work for, Rose, has been very good with that. Horizon was good with that. I take it, and I encourage those, if there's training opportunities, please take advantage of it. Yes?
What were those acronyms you were saying? Some of us are relatively very.
There's so many acronyms, I know.
It was the ones you were talking about with the training, like I'd be very proud to be in what? I didn't know.
So CIT is crisis intervention training.
Oh, okay. See, yeah.
MRT is more recognition therapy, which deals with a specific population. There's so many.
Yeah, I'm still trying to catch up. I'm only like 5 months into this thing, so I'm like really new.
Keep at it.
You'll learn as you go. If you hear an acronym that you don't understand, ask questions.
Yep.
That's what I did. Like, what is that? Okay, this sounds interesting. I'm all in. Let's go. So, yeah, but there is a lot to learn.
I'm over a year in and I'm still catching up.
I think I did that.
Does anybody know of training opportunities that, based on some of the ones that I mentioned, is there any other ones that people have gotten involved in?
And
Yes.
what?
Okay.
Yeah.
See, I didn't hear about that.
It's the training, like, you have to train people how to use our.
Oh, revive. Okay, I heard something different. Sorry. It's hard hearing up here.
And there are a couple on Facebook, peer recovery groups on Facebook that post different training opportunities. So even on my day off, there'll be one, and a lot of them are free. Some of them are not, but some of them are free that you can just, and they offer, continuing education if you're already certified. I love those.
And I'm so glad you brought that up, like social media and media in general. I heard a little bit about this, like media just focuses on the addiction. I believe Mark was the one who said they just show pills and needles and all that stuff. It's like, dude, I'm having flashbacks, man. Like, let's not show that. Let's talk about some recovery, right? But social media is another place that I've seen a lot of negativity and a lot of stigma and all that stuff. And I encourage y'all, if you do use social media, put the good stuff out there. Spread it, and look up the training opportunities that are on the social media.
One other source too I like, and I've told these about, there's so much you can learn just on YouTube. They have webinars that happened in the past, and they broadcast them, and you learn so much there. Like I said, my best friend now, she's the one that suggested I, learn more about active listening, and there's so tons of stuff about active listening and stuff.
All right. So how do you advocate for yourself as a PRS at your workplace? I can ask y'all that, if y'all have any answers to that question.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. What was it?
How do you advocate for yourself as a PRS at your workplace?
I'm known to file complaints. I complain about everything. It's more about that, Rich, is what they're saying.
I've had to have a conversation with drug court recently about, my peers are not there to be, narcs for you. They're not there to tell on people for you. They're not there to, to help kind of clarify our role. So there's times that, that comes up.
Yeah.
Advocate for what it is a peer is supposed to be doing.
Yeah. There's many times, well, not many times, but when I was working at the drug court, I would see individuals, participants one-on-one, and they didn't want to talk to their case manager. They didn't want to talk to the therapist because they felt some type of way about them. And then, I know Carl Mack could relate to this. They want to be, can you be my therapist? No, I can't. That sounds like a scope of practice. However, you have the ability to, if that therapist doesn't work, go try another one. And if I need to come in and advocate for you, do the release thing and all that stuff, then I can be involved in that. And that's the unique thing about peer support. Also, just let them know, hey, I'm a peer coach, peer recovery specialist. We can work on this stuff and encourage you to, have a voice and tell your therapist, hey, this is what I want. This is what helps me in my recovery. And if they still are combative against you, then move on.
I think
about
it's really
your recovery.
I think it's really funny too. As a supervisor of peers, I have this conversation with all of them. They always worry about resources, and they never consider themselves as one.
Yeah.
Just like
I continually educate clinicians on exactly what my lane is, because they often don't get that.
And that's a form of advocacy right there. Educate them, tell them what value you bring, and really, sometimes you don't even have to say anything. I find it good to say things, but also just being that role model. Watch the blessings happen, and I've seen some therapists are like, "Dude, you do a good job. How'd you do that?"
Hey John, we got a lot of several people in the chat are commenting that they build positive relationships with their coworkers, specifically their supervisors when possible, and advocate for themselves, remind people of their scope of work. Let's see here, we've got define a clear role and expectations. There's another one, let's see here. Yeah, Samantha says, for me, advocacy for myself at work began with having a good relationship with my supervisor who's a clinician.
That's awesome.
I think a good part about where I work, the part I work with the mental health part, they encouraged me to go around the entire building, all the departments, and introduce myself, and not only my peer support, but I offer my other skills, like my graphic skills, my research skills, and I give my numbers. If you need help with assistance with anything you do, or with clients, whatever, this is my strength. This is just something I bring to the table. But I also bring to the table, I can relate to this person maybe in a way that maybe you can't physically. I could be a partner in your, in the program.
As a mental health care, I know, she's also mental health care, but sometimes our voice gets lost in the 12-step vibes, and especially a person who's never experienced that. Like my first experience at going to a meeting, it was a 24-hour meeting, and here's a bunch of people getting up, and I didn't know what I was getting myself into. And I ran out of there. I started crying. I was like, how can I help these people? They didn't went through all this stuff. And my peers came to me like, calm down. It's going to be okay. Come to them with the emotions that you felt, things like that. That sobered me up, because I'm like, oh yeah, I felt loneliness. I felt like I was at the edge of the world and blah, blah, blah. And that's how I can connect with the peers that I serve and also my peers, because I've never lived that life. I continually ask questions without, I hope, not triggering, because I was triggering everybody. And I was like, how did you do that drug again? Where did you get that drug? And now I look at my peers just because we put it all out there and you're afraid to do that, there's no difference between us.
Yeah.
So that's why I come to and tell them, I'm like, we're not doing this today.
That's advocacy. And I like that you said you go and you get involved, you ask questions. You know, even though you internalize like, oh my God, look, how did you do that, and this and that. And for me, that's like, I have to be careful with that because I'm the person that can, once again, in addiction, I will take all your stuff and I'll try to fix this, but I won't fix me. But now that I'm in that place to fix me, I have to learn the boundary of recovery outside of work is my responsibility. But it's not my recovery, it's not my job. My job is to provide that, you know, the services. And what I've heard in the ethics is like tiptoe on that line, don't cross it. So, or I'm gonna find that man coming to argue with me. You
I was
know?
about to
Like,
say, where's that guy?
so,
John, Carl's got something. You got
yes.
So one way that I found, and you going through all this helped me to even recognize that I did this, that I was advocating for myself at work. When COVID started was like right after I started working at the health department. And I noticed that they started to use me to call some of the contacts. And one of the things that I noticed at that point is that we have a pretty large Latino community here in the area. And they didn't have all of that stuff in Spanish, not at that point. And so I was able to advocate that I had a training while I was working on the crisis stabilization unit to become a qualified bilingual person because I speak Spanish. And so that was one way to advocate for myself. And you know, since then they've understood the importance of being inclusive of the Latino community. And so I got in touch with the person that was in charge of the Latino Community Center here and set up a day for them to be able to come in and get their vaccines and things like that. So it was really good.
That's awesome. Once again, that's advocacy. Speaking of Carl Mack, you know, he got me involved with like a lot of local coalitions around here, the CVAR, the Peer Collective, we have the Code, and we're supposed to network here, I believe, you know, so get connected to some of the coalitions around here locally. So let's move on to this. I love this reading that I found. Peers are supposed to work in the gray areas where the biggest traps are. Some are afraid they will infringe on clinicians. We are in the position to influence the success of this workplace, which we just kind of heard some of the, you know, stories that kind of relate to that. And big shout out to Janice Dyer, I think that's how I pronounce it. Dower, thank you for that quote, because that's very inspirational. I'm right at the end of my slides, but I do want to read something real quick, and I'll kind of tell you a backstory of it, and then if there's any more further questions or thoughts about advocacy or anything you may have heard in this conference, I might have answers. If not, I can maybe be that resource worker. But I was sitting here listening to everybody and the previous speakers, and you know, I'm trying to prepare for this speech, right? And I thought about my mom. My mom was, you know, she showed me tough love through my addiction, but she wouldn't enable, which is a great thing. And when we had a talk during my early recovery at one time, she used to say, you know, I used to call jails, morgues, looking for you, worried about my son. And in my active addiction, I remember having a car ride from her. I think she picked me up from rehab or something, and she started getting involved in some of the music I listened to, which was weird. And she's like, I need you to listen to this song. It reminds me of you. And I heard the song. It came up 3 times in the past week, and I don't know. I felt like that was a sign. And I'm about to read some of the lyrics, and it kind of, for me, people could take this very differently, I guess. But for me, when she said it reminded me of me, it felt like where the stigma comes in, where you feel alone and you're separated from the community, the larger world that I spoke about earlier. So there's going to be two aspects of this for me. It's like what I felt in active addiction, and also what I see as I'm providing support and what I need to remember, to not judge, to not label, to not, feel that stigma, show empathy. So here it is. 2 packs of cigarettes a day, the strongest whiskey Kentucky can make. And that's a recipe to put a vagabond on his hands and knees. And I watched it all up close. I knew him more than most. I saw a side of him he never showed, full of sympathy for a world that wouldn't let him be. And that's the man he was. Have you heard enough? It's what a shame to judge a life that you can change. The choir sings and the church bells ring, so won't you give this man his wings? What a shame to have to beg you to see that we are all not the same. What a shame. And there's a hard life for every silver spoon, and there's a touch of gray for every shade of blue. And that's the way that I see life. If there was nothing wrong, then there'd be nothing right. And for this working man they say could barely stand, there's got to be a better place to land, some kind of remedy for a world that wouldn't let him be. I was going to cry.
Yeah, nobody said
So, thank you so much. I don't think I took up a whole hour, but I do want to leave some room for some discussion or any thoughts, questions. I'll take virtual questions as well.
We got a
and
lady right here. That's a question.
You can't share song lyrics without sharing the song.
Shine Down is the name of the band.
Oh,
The song's called What a Shame.
What a shame. I like Shonda. I like Second Chance too by them.
They're very good on, like, I can't put it in words. They're just a good band. Any of this? Yes, sir.
Yeah, when I said I filed complaints, it was kind of in jest, but not really. I'm not unique here. I work pretty deeply embedded within the medical model. I work at a managed care organization, so I attend a lot of treatment team rounds, ICT rounds, case rounds, and when these rounds start, I'm on there with, clinicians, doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners, social workers. And when these rounds start, the first thing you do, right, is diagnosis medications. That's where they start. And so when I say I file complaints, what I'm doing is in these meetings, my objective and my goal is to stay true to peer support. Like, I am there because my voice is an equal voice in that room to be heard. So they're, well, this is what we need to do. Are they medically compliant? And I'm always like, what do they want? Has anybody asked them what they want? Do they have informal supports? And staying true to peer support. And then talking with other peer support specialists that watch that drift. I'll start using clinical terms, and then coming back and advocating more, filing more complaints. Listen, this is medication, this is, medical model heavy, this is clinician heavy, this is outside my scope. And that is how I advocate for peer services within the medical model. That's what I meant by filing complaints.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for your advocacy. Yes?
I think that a big part of advocacy is standing up for peer services in every relationship. When you're talking to people at the grocery store or standing in line at the bank or anywhere else, you start talking about just little things which might lead to pieces of your story. And that helps to break down the stigma, because here I am amongst a world of people who are in recovery, talking to somebody who has no idea that this world is out here. And there's so many times I get people say, hey, do you have a card? Do you have a website? Is there a way that I know somebody who could, always I know somebody. So tell your story right where you are. Doesn't mean your whole story, but if you can tell a story in just a couple minutes, like the elevator story, how long it takes to go up and down an elevator, you're advocating for reduction and elimination of stigma everywhere you go. So, you may not want to be up on a stage or a platform, but just tell pieces of your story of recovery, because that's what counts. And breaking the stigma every single day for people who just have no idea that recovery is even possible.
Thank you for sharing that,
You know,
yes.
something I have seen too, going back again to YouTube, that has helped me, there are more and more people that are going on YouTube and just putting videos on there, sharing their story of how their life has changed. From, like I say, my community, the type of community I came from, I didn't realize there were people like me from that particular type of community. So that's a voice too. You can, if you don't feel comfortable like talking in person, you know, or you're not to that point yet, you can talk about it in crowd. You can voice yourself, you know, on video, because a lot of people that aren't comfortable going out around people, like I wasn't because of the PTSD. I couldn't really go out and see people, but I found things on YouTube that gave me hope. That, oh, maybe, you know, they're seeing that like that, maybe I'm not so crazy.
Thank you for sharing that. Is there any other, yes?
I was just going to say that some of the people under here share with me that I am a family member here, and I see a lot more change of stigma within the people that suffer SUD. But I find that that stigma, and it's pointed out to me, really exists with parents. You know, that is not, it's still out there because they don't want to bring it up. Where somebody's in recovery, they get to the point where they're like, I can talk about it. I did this, I did that, but that's where I see where work needs to be done.
And that's a form of self-advocacy for me because I've had a couple family members who use stigma language, and I stood up for myself. I said, no, you're not going to talk to me like that. I understand you don't maybe necessarily understand it, but I'm here to like help you understand it. And if they can get past that, then I have to set some boundaries. But that is a form of self-advocacy right there.
I think families, a lot of times, I've come to realize this lately. As screwed up as my family was, and they were, that a good book that really helped me was It Did Not Start With You. And I realized they did the best for where they were ended. And so when I was like, they couldn't handle it, they couldn't accept the fact, you know. So I see, I guess I've got a different point of view. I can understand it, but I can, like my sister said something when I got my boyfriend, well, you just sound angry all the time, and I didn't talk to her, it's just something I would post. And I tried to be very understanding, and I would say, well, anger isn't necessarily a bad emotion if it can lead you in the right direction. I didn't try to be judgmental, but just trying to get her to understand that we're different people. We're all from the same creator or whatever, but we're different. We're not carbon copies of each other.
But I think the war is like families out of other families. It's like, I don't want you to know what's going on. It's the dirty little secret. And
Yeah.
I see
It's still within the four walls of your house.
Yeah, within the substance of sharing your story.
Yeah.
He's progressed so much, but families still have that. It is a journey to make. Like I'm so moved by the way you feel about your mom now.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a long time to realize.
Look at how
But I
they
think
take
there's families still that are like, you're never gonna show me gratitude. And then the other side of it is, we don't want anybody to know that this exists.
And thank God for, you know, there is some family support groups out there that focus on that. So,
Right.
But look at how long it took us to get here as far as people who have suffered. It might take us a little bit longer to help families get to the point where it's okay to talk about it. Because again, I grew up in multiple generations of severe alcoholism. And with walking on our house, you know, we didn't talk about it outside.
But that's why I'm glad, you know, I'm a family. There's support, but it's just, I'm glad that it's growing.
yes, I agree with you there. And the more we advocate for all those areas, the more it will grow. All right.
John, let's do one more before you finish up.
Sure.
This gentleman right
Yeah,
here.
I'm sure we're all ready to get out of here. So you kind of scammed over it at the end, but I just want to highlight that last reel. You brought up the idea that clinicians and peers working together. I was very fortunate to get to go to the last event in Reston, and myself and Patrice, we did a breakout session, and it was literally titled, "It's not a competition, peers and clinicians working together." So it's extremely important that we know our role and where it ends and where theirs begins, and treat each other with the respect we all deserve. Like,
I'm so glad you said that because I know the peer recovery specialists, we feel like we're underneath all that. We're just kind of that taxi service and all that stuff. But we also have a duty to understand them too. That way we can better connect.
what? Stigma goes both ways. What?
Yep. All right. Well, thank you all for having me, and thank you for